The Rock and Roll and Coffee Show is brought to you by Retroactive, located at Broadway at the Beach in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, taking you back to the 70s, 80s, and 90s. ShopRetroactive.com. Pick up your bottle of the Rock and Roll and Coffee Show Hot Rockin' Hot Sauce now at Retroactive or rnrcoffeeshow.com.
It's the Rock and Roll and Coffee Show. Yeah, we do.
Well, let's just get right into it. You have a new album coming out with the Fifth called We Are One, coming out May 2nd on RFK
Yes.
Media.
Yes.
And this is the first release with RFK, correct?
Yeah, we were the first band actually signed to Ron's new label, RFK Media. And, we were, of course, very excited when they asked us. And, having Ron as the label president, you couldn't ask for a better label president because you have somebody that is still an entertainer, still out there writing music, still out there playing shows. So, we never had like that corporate boot on our neck going, hey, when's it going to be finished? When's it going to be finished? We need a single. We need this. We need that. Ron and Aaron, they just really stood back and let us write the songs and let them all progress organically. And we couldn't be more happy, man. The record turned out great, and we're super excited about it.
I'm excited to hear it. I heard the first single, Blind.
Yes.
Cool song, very cool riff, very catchy, heavy riff.
Yes.
Is that, and I think Starlight, your first single is going to be on it too, right?
Correct. Yes.
So is that a good representation of what's going to be on the rest of the album?
Well, we left it up to the powers that be to pick the first official single when the record was released. Starlight's been out for about a year while we were finishing up the rest of the record, and we left it up to Ron to pick what he wanted to be the first official single, and he went with Blind, and I'm very happy with it. It is one of the heavier songs on the record. But I think it's a really good representation of what the band is and the direction that we're going in. It's very much in the modern rock vein, but you can hear the elements of 80s and there's a little bit of everything. But, as far as the rest of the record goes, it's a really good listen. You go from heavier songs, you go to more melodic commercial songs, you go to there's a lot of places to go on the record. And it's one of those CDs that you could put on in a road trip and listen to it from beginning to end. And you don't push, fast forward to the next song, I'd like to think. So it's a good representation of the band, big vocals, big background vocals, harmonies, smoking guitars, and just everything that you like in a good hard rock song.
Now you recorded here I'm in South Carolina, so you recorded here in Charleston, right? Down at
Yes.
Eric Bass's studio?
At Eric Bass's studio, we were very, very fortunate to get the opportunity to go in there. And that's because our producer, Chris McLernon, who is my bass player in Cold Sweat and was also played bass in Saigon Kick, he's been friends with Eric and the Shinedown guys for several years. So he's worked in that studio before. He's been like the fly on the wall that's watched them write songs, put songs together, and record in that studio. So there was very much a comfort factor there for Chris, and working with their head engineer, Eric Rickard. It was just something that it felt right for Chris, and we wanted to be at a place that, he felt comfortable. But most of all, I think we're the second band outside of Shinedown that's recorded anything there. So to be able to record on such sacred ground and to record at a place that so many massive hit songs have been written and recorded at, we were very honored, and we tried to make the most of it.
And maybe some of that'll rub off on this album.
Yes, please let it rub off. Rub a dub, baby. Give it to me. Give it to me.
So you've worked with Chris, I know, in Cold Sweat. I've had Chris on the show. I've talked to Chris a few times. How did the decision for him to be producer on this record come about?
Well, Chris is part of the RFK Media family. Cold Sweat is also signed to the label. And, Chris has always been that very musical guy. Even in Cold Sweat, he was really great with harmonies. He was really great with sounds. getting the right textures, because sonically, things have it's a texture here, it's a sound there, it's a little bit of different mixture of putting everything together to where you have a delicious stew, so to speak. And Chris was always one of those guys. So I was the one that first threw out the idea of Chris producing the next record. And luckily, Ron and Aaron were all on board with it. And Chris put his touches on Starlight, because there was an original version of Starlight that was on an RFK compilation CD. And Chris got a hold of it, and he put the sprinkles on it, man. He put the sprinkles on the cupcake. I mean, he put the icing on the cake, the sprinkles, and he really put that special touch on it. And he made a good song into a great song. And that's what a good producer does. He doesn't try and alter it so much that you don't recognize it anymore. He puts those little touches on it that enhances it. And Chris is just a master at that. He really is.
Did Ron have any input in any of the songs?
Actually, no.
No? Okay.
Ron just kind of stood back and let us do our thing. I mean, that was the wonderful thing. And it wasn't that we wouldn't take, any advice from him or take any creative input from him. I'm sure him and Chris kind of had some discussions when the mixes started, being thrown about and stuff like that. But as far as in a whole, like I said previously, Ron just kind of stepped back and trusted us to produce a great record, and whenever you have somebody with his history and background, so willingly giving you the freedom to do your own thing, you don't want to screw that up. You don't want to let him down. And we knew that the stakes were high on this, and we had a lot of confidence that Chris would make our songs even better. And luckily, everything it fell into place. So we're very, very lucky.
Awesome. Well, yeah, Blind is a great song. Now, you debuted that yesterday on Ron's show, I believe.
Yes, sir.
It comes out officially tomorrow per the time of this recording, right?
Correct. Yeah, it's officially on all streaming platforms tomorrow, and the record drops May 2nd. So.
Right. So people watching this, it's out now.
Yes.
They can go hear it now if they haven't heard it already.
Yes, please go listen to it. Go download it.
Yeah. Talk about the writing process for the record. Was it any different working with the guys that are in the band now? Because they've been in band, about 5 years?
Yeah, the lineup that I have right now has been with me for about 5-6 years now. And, this has been my baby. This has been, you think of Whitesnake, you think of Coverdale, you think of Aerosmith, you think of Steven Tyler. This is my Whitesnake. This is Roy Cathey's vehicle. It's always been my vehicle to write and record music. And through the years, I've had different players. But like with anything, it ebbs and flows, and, you have people come and go. And, I've always dreamed of having this lineup, and I've got 3 other guys in the band that are rock stars, and they are incredibly talented musicians in their own right individually. And I'm the kind of guy that, contrary to popular belief, not all lead singers suffer from LSD lead singer's disease. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I'm the type of guy that I came from the background of the early Van Halens and the Motley Crues, to where you had individual people in the band that the fans gravitated to. Some guys like Nikki Sixx, some guys like Tommy Lee. You know what I mean? So I've always wanted to have a band to where everybody could stand on their own individually, but collectively, we were all on the same page. We all knew what we wanted. And I was lucky enough that I had guys that let me be the quarterback and let me lead the band and point us in the direction. And that's pretty much how it's been. And if you can get a group of guys together that you can get on a bus and live with them for a month, and you're not wanting to kill each other,
right? Right.
You've got something good. And I know all bands say, "Oh, we're a brotherhood," and "Well, we're all brothers," and stuff like that. We really are. I mean, we really genuinely like each other. our rehearsals are more of a frat party because we're just goofing off and
Mm.
cracking jokes and stuff like that. But when it comes time to get busy and put the rubber to the road, we get it done. And I'm very fortunate to share the stage with these guys. I
Well,
mean, I swear to
it's
God.
important to get along and to like the people you're in the band with. I've had a lot of people on this show, and a few of them have told me that it's not really about the musicianship and all that. Of course, you got to play your instrument, but it's more about the hang than anything.
Absolutely. I mean, the creative process is a very personal process. You know what I mean? You're exposing yourself, whenever you're bringing a riff to the table, whenever you're bringing lyrics to the table, a melody to the table. You hold these things really close to your heart, and you want to be able to be vulnerable with these people and be able to bring something up and have them be able to go, hey, that's good, but I think you can do it better. Or, hey, I like this part, but I don't like that. Try something like this. And that's the way it is with the fifth. We've been like, it's been a pleasurable experience writing this record because it was never like pulling teeth. It was always, Justin would come up with a riff. Jake and Gary would jump in with a beat. I would sit back and listen to it and come back the next rehearsal with a structure of a melody and some lyrics. So it's something that progressed very organically. I hate to keep using that word, but it's really the truth. It's something that just kind of came out of us, and it wasn't hard writing this record, but we made sure that we did it right and we took our time with it.
Is writing natural for you with the melodies and stuff? Do they come to you naturally, or do you struggle with them sometimes?
I mean, some songs it flows. It's just
Mm,
like blah, it just all comes out. There's other ones that you got to work on. There's
mhm.
there's songs that I will scrap 3 times before I land on something that I think is good enough. I generally try to not go with the first idea that I come up with, but sometimes the first idea that I come up with is the best idea.
Sure.
But I'm not afraid to ball up the notebook paper and throw it in the trash can and go, no, I got
Yeah.
to start over.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where you've got to be able to be your own worst critic and always have in mind that you want to put out the best product possible.
Mhm.
And a lot of times the path of least resistance is not the path to take. Sometimes you've got to labor over them. Sometimes they come, and sometimes it's work.
Do you do any of the musical composition? Do you write music or just the lyrics and melodies?
I'm mostly just a lyric and melody guy, but I do play a part in the arrangements of the songs, as far as like, hey, this part needs to go a little bit longer. Instead of going to this part here, can we try something a little bit chunkier? You know what I mean? I make my suggestions musically, but I always I kind of try and stay in my lane. And that's another thing that I think has made the rest of the guys appreciate being in the fifth is I let them be themselves. I'm not trying to step into their territory. I don't know how to play guitar, so how am I going to tell my guitar player to play a riff better? You know what I mean? So I let the guys be themselves, and I help with the arrangements. I'm a closet drummer, so it's like I'm mostly with Gary going, hey man, can you try a little double beat part here, or can you maybe do like a tribal tom part here. So I make my contributions musically, but I'm very much hands off with the guys and let them do their thing.
Let's go back a little bit. Now you were were you born and raised in North Carolina? I know you're there now.
Born and raised in North Carolina, Fort Bragg, Fort Liberty, whatever you want to call it, home of the 82nd Airborne. I grew up on stage singing in spandex in front of Green Berets and
Spandex.
paratroopers. So, you get a real tough skin and you learn how to be a front man on stage because you got to learn how to talk a little shit. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
yeah, I was born and raised here in North Carolina.
Yeah, and you've been in music for pretty much ever since you were like 15.
15 years old, I'm a lifer.
Wow.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm one of those guys that I was very fortunate to have parents that supported me in my music. And my dad managed my first band, Gibraltar, and we traveled up and down the East Coast for about 9 years until I got my lucky break down in Florida, and I ran across a cat named Eddie Law, who was friends with Oni Logan, and they were, signed and all that stuff. And then Oni left to go join Lynch Mob, and they were left without a singer, and they were looking for one for 6 months. And I'm the guy that never been on an airplane before, and I flew out on a Monday, auditioned on a Wednesday, and I was signing a record deal on Friday, and everything happened really fast. Yeah, it was, it was quite the whirlwind experience. Very, very rock starish, like the movie. It was very much like that. Yeah.
Well, Gibraltar, I saw that your CDs and vinyl, they're still out on the internet for sale.
Yeah, yeah, it's been bootlegged several times, and it's crazy because, I was a teenager, that band was, we were all kids. That was kind of our claim to fame, was the fact that we were all, except for one member who was like in his early 20s. The rest of the guys in the band were like, 16, 17, 18, 19 years old, so we were all kids playing the bars, playing, Queensryche and Iron Maiden and, all the latest, hits that you saw on MTV, and my dad managed the band. We were able to get booked into these clubs because we had my father, who was acting as like the entourage, the leader, the person that was like the chaperone for all these testosterone crazed young kids, But I was really fortunate. My father was a huge influence on me and in my life. And, when you have your dad there, you can't get all drugged up and drinking, and you can't party. And my father was always like, son, it's called show business. So you boys can do whatever you want after the show, but I expect everybody to be sober, ready to perform, and don't get so messed up that you can't perform the next night. So my dad always kind of instilled a sense of professionalism in me, but it also made me quite the hermit because, here I am, I'm still the guy that could still hit the high notes. And it's because I never smoked, I never got into heavy drugs. I never got into drinking and stuff like that. I was always protecting my voice. So, I gotta give it to my dad. God rest his soul. He really put me on the path of, being appearing to be a crazed rock and roll wild man on stage, but really, I'm pretty laid back and always trying to protect my voice. And I let the boys on the bus have a lot of fun. I'm the first one to cash out and go to the back and go to bed and stuff like that. So.
Well, it sounds like Dad knew. Sounds like he knew the business. Was he in the business or?
He wasn't in the business, but oddly enough, his brother and his cousin had a gospel bluegrass band that released a couple of records in Western North Carolina. So, whenever I first started singing in my first band, at the time I was playing football, and I was, going to football camps at NC State, and I was going to be like, quarterback. I was going to go to college and play ball. And I was one of those guys that was friends with everybody. I was friends with the stoners, the preps, the black, the white. It didn't matter. I was friends with everybody. And I had a friend that had a little band. And I went to go see him practice one afternoon. And the lead singer, they were doing "You Really Got Me" by Van Halen. And music always had a connection with me for some reason. I didn't know why. I didn't know why, but music connected with me. And that record, Van Halen 1, I knew it backwards and forwards. And I was a cocky little athlete kid. And I'm like, hey man, you're singing that wrong. His cadence was wrong. It's like, girl, you really got me. He just didn't have the cadence. He goes, oh, you think you could do better here? And he hands me the microphone, and I did do better. And they ended up hiring me that day. And I remember going home and walking in the back door and go, Mom, Dad, I'm singing in a band. And my mom goes, the hell you are. And she just starts railing me. You've worked so hard on your sports, and you went to that football camp, and we paid all that money, and you got all these coaches and stuff depending on you. And my dad just quietly got up, walked down the hallway. He went into his bedroom. I heard him open the closet. I heard him rummage through the closet, and he come walking down the hallway with an album in his hand. And he put the album on the table, and it was the Cathey Trio. It was his brother and his cousin. It was his gospel bluegrass band. And he goes, right here's where you got it from. Judy, shut the hell up.
Yes, it's for Dad.
And from that point on, my dad supported me in my music, and it was basically like, hey, you could do this sports thing, or you could sing. And I said, well, I'm going to do both. And I tried to do both for the longest time, but then one summer, happened, and I showed back up for football season, and everybody else grew 3-4 inches, and I stayed the same. And I went, you know what?
Leave.
I think I'm gonna go with this singing thing full time. So that's kind of how it happened for me.
Okay. And then, so you mentioned you were playing covers with Gibraltar too. How much of an impact did singing all those covers have on you developing your voice?
Well, when you're singing covers, and especially when you're singing metal,
Mm-hmm.
and you're playing 3-4 nights a week, and you're playing 3 to 4 1-hour sets a night, you learn really quickly how to like protect your voice, how to hold back on the Wednesday, Thursday shows to save your voice for the Friday and Saturday shows, which are the money shows. And when you're playing a broad variety from like Bon Jovi to Queensryche to AC/DC to Black Sabbath to Judas Priest, then back to, Honeymoon Suite, you know what I mean? We played like everything. It kind of made me a chameleon. I kind of learned how to mold my voice to suit the song, to try and sound like the artist and try and mimic it as best as I could. And that's why now, later on in my life, I can still do the high notes, and I could do a scream. I could do the low stuff, and I could do the high stuff, because that's just kind of how I trained my voice through the years.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I was listening to some earlier fifth stuff.
mm-hmm. Right.
And I gotta say, I think your voice is better now than those earlier
Thank you.
records.
Thank you. I mean, when I first put the fifth together, I could only choose from the talent pool that was around me. And I wrote according to the guitarist material that was coming from them. And at the time when I first put the fifth together, I don't want to say that I wanted to like ignore my Cold Sweat past. I just kind of wanted to forge new ground, and I wanted to kind of focus on more of the modern rock sound, like the Disturbed, Godsmack, the lower register, drop D tuning, and, a lot of the kind of stuff. And, as I kept going and kept progressing and stuff like that, I started to embrace my Cold Sweat past more and more. But I think the thing that really kind of elevated my vocals the most is about 3 years ago, I started doing some shows with a Boston tribute band that's based out of Phoenix, Arizona. And when they first approached me and offered me the money they were offering, I was like, "Ooh, okay, yeah, yeah, Boston, love it, absolutely." But the thing is, I heard Boston material, but I never really listened to the Boston material. And then when I started listening to it, I started going, wow, this guy's like really good. And it made me, I tried to power metal through it. You know what I mean? I tried to Rob Halford those songs, and I went, oh no, I can't do that. So the Boston gig basically put me more in touch with my head voice. So I learned how to separate my head and my chest voice. A lot of Brad Delp stuff. He had a very, very strong falsetto head voice, and he was able to cross over between the two pretty effortlessly. So the Boston gig really kind of put me more in tune with my voice and really made me a better singer. So, and I'm the guy that, I'm the one that's, got the humidifier in his hotel room. I'm the one that's walking around with throat coat tea. I'm the one that has the portable nebulizer, before the show and after the show. I'm warming up, I'm warming down. I've always taken my voice very seriously. So, this is my instrument. I want to be as good as I possibly can. And I want to do everything I can do to make it as good as I can. So, I think being willing to learn different styles and accept my own limitations and try and progress farther has made me a better singer through the years.
Right. Well, whatever you're doing is working. So
Thank you. Thank you. It's living like a monk, Joe. That's
that's
the
okay.
secret.
That's okay. That's okay. Let's get into Cold Sweat a little bit. Now, when you got that audition, um, you had mentioned your guy in South Florida,
Mhm.
right? He
Yeah.
told you about that gig,
Right. Right.
right? Okay. So then refresh us on that real quick for people that aren't aware of what happened.
Well, Mark Ferrari, after he left Keel, he put a band together called Ferrari, and they shopped for deals, and they got a deal, and they were managed by Wendy Dio, and they had some really good things going for them. And there was the infamous meeting between Lynch and Ferrari and Oni Logan at the Whiskey that one time where, he's coming downstairs, they're going upstairs, and Lynch stops Oni and goes, do you want to play in a band called Ferrari or do you want to drive one? And Oni left the band the week that they were supposed to start recording the record. So they were left high and dry. So for 6 months, they auditioned singers. Every guy in LA auditioned for it. They had a ad on Z Rock, which was a syndicated metal show, looking for a singer. And it went on for 6 months. And I run across Eddie Law in the Button South in Hallandale, Florida. And it was one of those gigs that you played 4 1-hour sets and you weren't getting done till like 4 o'clock in the morning, And Eddie, bless his heart, was highly intoxicated when he approached me. And, he goes, hey, man, I'm friends with this guy, and he's quit this band, and they're signed to MCA Records, and Wendy Diaz, their manager, and you're perfect, and Mark Ferrari's in the band, and here's his phone number, man. You got to call him, man. You got to call him. And I'm like, by that time I'd been on the bar circuit for 9 years, and I was way too jaded for somebody as young as I was. So, I remember, yeah, man, appreciate it. Thanks. Yeah, okay, cool. Right on, right on. So, I put the phone number in my pocket, and about 2 days passed, and we were out on the road. So it was time to do laundry. And thank God, I went through my pockets, and I went through my pockets, and there was a phone number. And me and my dad were sharing a hotel room, and I said, Dad, I'm like, this guy come up to me the other night talking about Mark Ferrari Keel, and he gave me his phone number and said he's looking for a singer out in L.A. I said, do you think I should call it? And my dad's like, well, shit, yeah, son, give it a call. Yeah, why not? So I in the hotel room, charged to the room after I asked my dad. I call it up, and Mark answers the phone, and I'm like, is this really Mark Ferrari? And he's like, yeah. Who is this? And I'm like, do you know a guy named Eddie Law? And he's like, yeah, well, who is this? I said, well, my name's Roy Cathey, and he told me that you're looking for a singer, and he says that that I'm a perfect fit for it, and I'd like to audition. And he's like, well, send me a promo pack. Take down my address. Joe, I didn't know what a damn promo pack was. I was a kid from North Carolina playing the cover bar circuit, So he says, send me a tape of you singing some stuff and some pictures and stuff, and I'll get back to you, So we get back from the road run, and I put together a haphazard, complete bullshit promo pack. And I mail it off, and I followed up with a phone call about a week or so later. And Mark's like, well, I got your stuff, and you got a good voice, but he's like, kind of like this. And I'm like, look, man, I'm a live singer. I said, if you give me a live audition, just let me audition. That's all I'm asking. And he goes, okay. He goes, I'll give you an audition, but here's the deal. The label's already flown out all the people that they're going to fly out. He goes, so I can't pay for your airline ticket. He said, if you pay for your airline ticket, he goes, I'll let you sleep on my floor while you're down here, and I'll give you an audition. And I'm like, bet, And swear to God, it was the first time I ever got on an airplane. It was to fly out to L.A. to audition for Cold Sweat. It wasn't called Cold Sweat at the time. So, I flew out on a Monday, I auditioned on Wednesday, and we rehearsed and I auditioned at Sound City, the famous recording studio where we recorded. And they had like some real rinky dink rehearsal studios with like just garbage PA, and it was terrible, But I go in there and I'm blasting through the songs. I mean, I'm murdering it. And they're like, "Oh, okay, that's good. Go through it one more time." Because they couldn't believe what they were hearing. And I remember Eric leaning over the guitar player, and they told me this story later. They're like, "Why does this piece of shit PA sound so much better with this guy? It's the same PA that all these other guys have done." They're like, "Shh, let's just see if he blows his voice out." And they made me sing through the songs 4 times.
Were they Cold Sweat songs or were they cover songs?
They were Cold Sweat songs. They were the songs that were going to be on the record. And they made me go through it like 4 times. And every time I got better, every time I got stronger. And I was like a space alien, because a lot of the singers out in LA, they only do originals and they do a 30-minute set. They're a cloud of dust and then they're done. Me, I was a cover kid, man. I'm just starting to get warmed up. Come on, we'll do it again. Okay, sure. You do it one more time. Yeah, fuck it. Let's go, So they're like standing behind me, they're all making faces like this. And then I'd turn around and be like, stonefish, like no emotion. But after the audition, I mean, they basically right then and there said, "You want to join?" And I was like, "Hell yeah."
Right on the spot.
Right on the spot. And I had to call my mom and dad. They had to pack up all my clothes and mail it out to me to California, because I was going immediately into pre-production. We went right into the recording studio. So it was something that was, very much a rock and roll fairy tale, and I have just amazing, good memories of that whole thing. And another mind blower is, we're managed by Wendy Dio, right? And I worship Ronnie James Dio. I had all of his cassettes, seen him in concert in Charlotte. I was in awe of him. And Wendy's like, "Well, look, you're going to need a place to stay. So since you're going right into pre-production," she goes, "Here's what we'll do. I'm leaving for Europe in 2 days. So you can stay at my house. And yeah, you can stay at my house while I'm gone, and you boys can start the whole process." And here I am. I'm like 22 years old from North Carolina, and I'm calling my friends, and I'm at I'm staying at Wendy Dio's house. You know what I mean? And that's when I started to see the veil of rock and roll, see through it, because Ronnie had a house, Wendy had a house. I thought for all these years that they were married, but it was more of a business relationship more than anything else. So, I'm staying at Wendy Dio's house. I'm calling my friends. I'm by the pool. I'm like, "Dude, you're not gonna believe this. I'm at Wendy Dio's house, laying out by the pool." So it was surreal. I mean, it was absolutely surreal how all that happened.
So you go in to record the first album, Breakout, right? That's what it was called?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Now you co-wrote 2 songs on that record, I think, right? Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
Long Way
Long Way-
Down and Killing Floor.
Killing
Yes.
Floor. Correct.
Yes.
Yes.
So did they have these songs finished, and you just changed some things around, or how'd that work?
Well, they had the majority of the material already written. It was already ready to go. But they had a couple of loose ends, and they felt like, well, hey, we've got this new guy. Let's try and, write something with him and see what his chops are as far as like his writing ability goes. And Long Way Down, if you listen to it, you can tell it's lyrically completely different from the rest of the record. It's a lot darker. It's a lot more subject oriented. Everything else was about, hey, let's make love tonight. Hey, let's party, chicks and partying and stuff like that. And mine is about a pilot going up 30,000 feet and his plane crashes. You know what I mean? I wrote, and I still try and write stories. I grew up with four sisters in a household playing those AM radio hits where, you know, I went through the desert on a horse with no name. You know what I mean? I come from a background of songs and lyrics telling stories that get embedded in your head. And when I wrote Long Way Down with the guys, we sat around the kitchen table at one of the fellas' apartments, and first line that I kicked out was, all systems go as I slowly climb aboard. I mean, they were like, whoa, this
Did
is
you
pretty
write these
cool.
lyrics on the plane on your way out there?
Yeah, no, no, no. But,
Just checking.
like I said, first time on a plane, you never know.
Now, a funny thing, well, it's not funny, I guess, but Chris told me that if I recall, you had put your video out and got dropped by your label the same day. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct.
Oh,
It was heartbreaking because we were out on the road doing a club tour, I think, with Child's Play. It was a
uh-huh.
co-headlining thing, and I remember Wendy called and wanted to have a band meeting, and we all kind of organized on the bus, and the tour manager, had a cell phone. One of them, back then they were about that
Yeah.
big. So he
Yeah.
pulls out this, hello, pulls out this massive cell phone, and she goes, "Hey, boys," and we're like, "Hey, Wendy, how's the tour going?" "Oh, it's great. We're having a great time, having good crowds and stuff." She goes, "Well, look, I've got good news and bad news. Which do you want first?" And we're like, "Well, we want the good news, Wendy." She's like, "MTV added your video today," and we're like, "What? Hey, well, what's the bad news? MCA dropped you." And we're like, ugh. So it was the whole cold sweat experience was a series of super high highs and super low lows.
Why do you think that is? What held it back?
Well, MCA was completely incompetent. They had already gone through several name changes. They were going to go with Ferrari, and Ferrari was for it at the beginning. And then all of a sudden, when it came to the whole merchandising of it, they were like, no. So we had to go from Ferrari. And then we went through this whole thing trying to come up with names. And, we come up with Crying Shame because one of the songs on the record was called Crying Shame, and that was going to be our signature song. And they did a trademark search, and they did all the artwork for Crying Shame with like the crest of a C and an S, and they do a trademark search and can't use Crying Shame. You can't use that. And we're like, shit, So we're like, well, they've done all this artwork. We like the CS. Let's try and come up with something that goes with CS. So the guys come up. I think it was Chris come up with Cold Sweat. They were all heavily influenced by Thin Lizzy, and we went with Cold Sweat. Well, by that time, MCA was just like, it was just a dog and pony show. And come to find out that MCA's legal department didn't even do a trademark search on the name. They were just like, "Oh, let's just go with it. Just go with it." And as soon as we got out there, and as soon as we started doing shows and playing with Ronnie on tour and stuff like that, they get a cease and desist letter from this little lawyer in upstate New York that represented basically a cover band. And they were like, "Oh, we're the corporate giant. You're just a fly. Piss on you, forget about it." And we're, ignored them. Well, that little lawyer was smart, and he did a trademark search and saw that the MCA hadn't even filed any type of trademark stuff. So they basically trademarked the name right from underneath us. Once MCA found out about that, here's where it gets dirty in the music business. They kept us out on the road for probably about 3 more months, knowing that the record was dead in the water. So we started to notice, we're playing major markets. We would go into these record stores to do in stores. They didn't have our product. And they were stalling on doing a video. And back then it was still the era of MTV. And we're like, we need a video, we need a video. And they kept stalling, they kept stalling. And Wendy was a ball buster. And she was like, look, we're going to film the video. We're going to use our money from the publishing and merchandising advance. We'll use Ronnie's rig, the lighting rig. We'll have a day off before the show in San Antonio. We'll shoot the video. We'll pay for the video. We're going to do a video whether you guys like it or not. And she basically steamrolled MCA, and like I said, we didn't know that the record was already dead in the water. So then grunge hit, and it was just like one thing after another, after another, after another.
Well,
So
grunge hit later, right? When was your album came out in 90 or right around there, right?
89, 90, it
Yeah.
came out around then, but the tides were starting to change by around 90. It was starting to change. And we were a band that, we just had too many warts on us, I guess, because we showcased for a lot of the big A&R guys at the time, and everybody passed on us because grunge was coming into favor. And there was this thing: if you were in Metal Edge magazine and smiling, they didn't want anything. They didn't want anything to do with you. It didn't matter how good the band was, how good the songs were, who your manager was, or who's in the band. You were in Metal Edge magazine. You were a pinup boy band, and that's not what the new wave of music is. So,
Well, I'm sure it's probably difficult, I would imagine. I could be wrong, but I would imagine it's difficult to get another record deal after getting fired from a label.
it's
Because
very difficult.
there's a reason they didn't want to push you anymore. So I would think that
Right.
another label would take that under
Well,
consideration.
right. They took it under consideration and stuff, of course, but you know, and if you were living out there, the change in the musical landscape was like that. I mean, it was just that fast. I mean, you would go down on the Sunset Strip a few months prior, and there's all these guys in skinny jeans and cowboy boots, and their hair's done, and they're wearing the fringe leather jackets, and they're passing out the flyers. It's just like it was. And then a month or so later, you go out there, it's flannel shirts, Doc Martens. Everybody looks like they haven't showered. Everybody's greasy, and it was just that fast. So it was like we were in fashion and out of fashion in a year and a half, 2 years.
Well, I mean, some good things that came out of that. I mean, you did get to tour with Dio. I mean, what kind of advice did Ronnie give you being a younger singer? Did he give you some advice out on the road about
Ab-
being a
abs-
professional?
Absolutely. And the main advice that Ronnie gave me was never forget the fans. He was like, never forget the fans. They're the reason that you're up there. Always find time to speak with them. Always find time to treat them with respect. And I was already kind of trained by my father to be that way, but to hear it from Ronnie, it really stuck with me. So that's why now, even with Cold Sweat, I'm the guy that's out there in the audience shaking hands and taking pictures. And, even on the day after our event, I'll stay, if the festival is 3 days and we play on the first day, Roy's going to stay all 2 days. And people will see me out in the crowd and they want to take a picture with me and they want me to sign something. And it really made me feel good to know that I'm getting that reputation because we played the Monsters on the Mountain Festival last year or year and a half ago. And I was out, walking around, catching bands and stuff. And I turned the corner and there was this guy and he's like, Roy, he goes, I knew you'd be here. I knew I would see you because you're one of us. You're a man of the people. And I was like, whoa. And that stuck with me, man, because this genre is a very small community. And if you have a reputation of being a douchebag, that gets spread around, you know. And I'd like to think that I've gone out of my way to be a fan friendly person. I never blow off a fan. I always have time to take a picture. I always have time to just have a little chat with them and stuff like that. And that comes from Ronnie, and that comes from my dad, and it just comes from trying to be a good person to the people that have made me be able to live this dream. I mean, I didn't get super rich and super famous, but I got to do everything that I dreamed of as a kid. I wanted to be signed to a major label. I wanted to be in magazines. I wanted to have a video on MTV. I wanted to ride on a tour bus. I wanted to take a jet plane to another country. I did all those things, you know. And for me, even though I didn't reach the super high stardom and, have the mansion with the pool and the sports car and everything, I got to live my dreams, and I'm still doing it. I mean, we just got finished. Yeah, I mean, I just got finished doing the Monsters of Rock cruise, and you know, Todd, the lead singer of Queensryche, approaches me after I did a jam and I did Jane by Jefferson Starship, and he's like, "Dude, you are unfucking real, man." To have somebody, one of your peers, somebody that you really look up to, compliment you like that, pinch me. You know what I mean? Because I'm like, I'm still a fan. I'm still a fan at heart, and I think that that's what makes me connect with the audience, is because deep down inside, I'm still that kid from North Carolina that opened up the albums or the CD cases and saw the lyrics and saw where it was recorded and looked at the band members' pictures and stuff. I'm still that kid.
Remember those days?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, and it's really sad, and I don't want to sound like the get off my lawn. Kids nowadays do not have the connection to music that we did. We lived it. We breathed it. Our friends talked about it. You went to the record stores. You went to the concerts. You talked about those concerts coming up with all your friends. It was so deeply ingrained in our DNA. That's why there's people to this day taking a third of their yearly income to do the Monsters of Rock cruise, so they could be close to the people that wrote the soundtrack of their lives. I mean, I've had people come up to me and go, "Man, that record, Breakout, dude, oh my God, that was the soundtrack of when I was 17 years old. I had a brand new Camaro, and man, I'd put that thing in, and man, it was just the summer, and the T-tops were down, or I had a sunroof, and my girlfriend broke up with me. Man, that record really connected with me." And when people say that to you, a lot of guys are like, "Oh yeah, thanks a lot," But for me, that's a huge compliment, because you've made an impression in somebody's life. The art that you made, the song that you wrote and performed on, is ingrained in somebody's life, and that to me is one of the greatest gifts of all, doing this.
Yeah. And you, like you said, you may not have be that rich, really huge rock star, but you have all those memories and experiences that nobody can take from you.
Oh yeah, and I'm one of those guys that, I live in a modest house. I've got a modest home. I'm a lifer. I'm one of those guys a long time ago went, "Hey, I'm going to be a musician. I'm going to be a rock musician. I'm going to do this. I'll have occasional, I've got a day job and stuff like that. But my music is my music, and it's my life, and it's what makes me who I am." So for me, I've always been the type of person that it's like, when I take that last breath, and when anybody takes that last breath, they're not going, "Oh, my house was so cool." You know what I mean? They're not going, "Oh, that car was so nice." No, you're thinking about the people that you loved, and you think about the things that you've done. And for me, I've got a lifetime. I've got 5 lifetimes of incredible memories and things that I've got to do through music. And to me, I'm a very wealthy man. I just don't have a lot of zeros in my bank account.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. Now, so back to the Fifth, you were the first band to sign with RFK, but it took you a long time to release a record. Why did you not want to get one out sooner, or what was the holdup there?
Cold Sweat.
Oh, geez. Okay.
Cold Sweat kind of reared its ugly head again. You know what I'm saying? And I say that in all joking. Cold Sweat became activated again, and we released the Unburied Alive record. We did the Monsters of Rock cruise. We did Monsters on the Mountain. We did M3. Just the Cold Sweat experience just kind of pushed the fifth onto the back burner a little bit. The whole time I was still, continuing to write. We went in and recorded a couple of the songs, and then we went on a slight hiatus, and then we would go back, and then we recorded the rest of it and in Charleston. And my guitar player is a new father, so we being a very family oriented band, we gave Justin the time to be a new dad. You know what I mean? We didn't want to put any pressures on him to, hey man, we got to finish this record. Hey, we got to go out on tour. We much rather have him just be like, hey, I want to be a dad for a little bit, and we let him be. We let him do that. He's got a beautiful daughter. She's a year and a half years old, and we gave him the opportunity to do what he wanted to do. And in the long run, I think that was the best path, because that's a pretty life-changing
Of course.
occurrence,
Of course.
and for us to be more like a family and go, hey, you take this time, go be a dad. We'll come back and we'll pick this thing up. And the Cold Sweat was going at the time, so everything kind of played out the way it was meant to be. But once again, it goes back to the whole thing. Ron and Aaron were never like, "Where's the record? Where's the record? Where's the record?" And it was always like, "We're working on it. We got it. It's ready. It's we're gonna do it. We got this."
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, and here we are. So May 2nd, about a month from now, We Are One will be out.
Yep.
So when you're releasing a record these days, what's the game plan for, what's the strategy of putting a record out today?
Well, luckily I'm putting all that stuff in the hands of people like Ron and Aaron. We've got a great publicist behind us with Jody Best, and we've got a great distribution company with Amplified Distribution. And you kind of just start setting things up to get it ready to be released. So right now we're in the pre-release hype stage. You'll start seeing a couple of more ads in some of the trades and stuff. Amplified Distribution took out a full page ad advertising the release in a trade and stuff, and that was a good signal for us. That means that the distribution company is behind us and is going to push the record. But right now, the music industry is still for rock bands in our genre. It's the wild, wild west. We're like the redheaded stepchild, especially if you're not signed to a major. And rock bands are still, it's still kind of an underground thing. If you're a fan of the genre, you're a fan of it. But a lot of the young people, they've been raised on country and hip hop and R&B and just frivolous pop music. You don't have as many young kids that are, attached to rock music as there used to be, but there's still a lot of them out there. So, for years, we were screwed over by the labels. Now we're being screwed over by the labels and the streaming services. So that's why for us, we felt it was best to go all in with Ron and RFK. It's more of a mutual partnership instead of us feeling like we're completely beholden to a label and we've got to recoup, or we're going to be sued, or we're going to be dropped. It's more of one of those old school situations where we're with a label and we're with people that want to see us develop. They want to see us grow. And right now we're with the release of We Are One, we're really planting the first seeds. The fifth has been around for many, many years, but this is the one. This record is the one that I'm wanting to really push and really have this be the pinnacle of what the band is all about, and have it be the stamp of what the fifth is. So I'm very optimistic, and I'm looking forward to the ride.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, good, man. So it's going to be available on what, vinyl and CD? What's this coming out on?
It's going to be available on, of course, all the streaming platforms. It's going to be available on CD. And I think there's been discussions. We're going to see, how it goes as far as sales wise with physical product before we offer it on vinyl. I want to put it on vinyl. All the rest of the guys want to put it on vinyl. We just got finished releasing the Unburied Alive on vinyl with a new song for Cold Sweat. So it'll end up on vinyl, but right now we want to get it out of the gates We want to make it available, on CDs and stuff like that. See how the streaming numbers are, and take it from there. But I could see it coming out on vinyl in another couple months.
Cool. And it can be pre-ordered now at
It,
your site, right?
yep.
The
Yeah.
fifthmusic.com and RFK site.
Yeah. RFKmedia.com, and you could also go to thefifthmusic.com, and there's all the pre-order sites and links to the new stuff, and we're super excited about it. It's some good stuff.
That's awesome, man. I'm excited for you. I can't wait to hear the whole record.
Thanks, Joe. I appreciate it, man. I really appreciate it, man. So much.
Now, as far as live shows go, are you going to try and get on a tour with this record, or are you going to go out on your own? Has that been discussed?
Well, it's been a wait and see process. Aaron Fisher also kind of acts as our manager as well as label rep. So we've been waiting to get some new product. So once we get some new product, they're going to start shopping us to some agents, and hopefully we'll get an agent behind us to kind of put us out on the road. We're excited about Bad Marriage signing with the label. They're East Coast, we're East Coast. I think it would be a great double bill. So I think that I could see us doing some tours with those guys coming up in the summer. But right now, whatever opportunities present to us, we're gonna jump on it and take advantage of it. It's wide open right now.
Right, and you got a show coming up May 1st up in at Reckless Shepherd.
Yeah, Reckless
M3
Shepherd.
pre-party, right?
It's the M3 pre-party. Dave Dillman and Detoxin Production. He's been putting on that show for several years, and he puts on a great show. It's a tradition now for people that go to M3 every year. And we're super excited about it, man, because it coincides with the record coming out. We're going to be sharing the stage with our label mates, Bad Marriage. Friends of ours, the Midnight Devils, are going to be on the bill. Ratchet Dolls are going to be on the bill. It's going to be a great show and a good time. And I couldn't think of a better audience to be debuting the new CD for. So we'll have product in hand and ready to sell and sign and make gas money to get back home.
Playing a lot of the new songs, I'm assuming.
Playing a lot of the new songs. We're doing the majority of the new record, but we also got to throw in, like the Shake Little Sister off the EP that got us on the Kiss cruise, and got to play a couple Cold Sweat tunes to kind of tip the hat to my background and stuff like that. So we try and play a well-rounded set, and we also like to throw in a little surprise cover at the end just to make fans kind of go, "Oh shit, I can't believe they played that."
Fun. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to be at that show, so I'm going to see you there.
Oh, fantastic, man! Yeah. Have you ever been to that joint before?
I haven't.
It's
I was up. I was up last year at M3. I sat in with Pete Evick. He did his acoustic thing, so I played with them there. And the funny thing is, Mark came up there and played with us.
I remember Mark talking about that.
And I remember I'm sitting up there because I didn't know who Pete was going to bring up. And he gave me 3 days, said, here's a bunch of songs, if you want to come up.
Yeah.
So I did. And then I was sitting up there, and then Mark came up on stage, and I leaned over to Pete when Mark was getting his guitar on and stuff. And I'm like, you didn't tell me I'm going to play Van Halen and Kiss with Mark Ferrari. And Pete leans over to me. He's like, you okay with that? I was like, yeah. It's kind of fun.
It's okay. Yeah. Mark's a trip, and I owe a lot to Mark. It was his band, and he let me in. There's not a lot of people that would, who is this unknown kid from North Carolina, but he gave me my shot, and I'll always be thankful, and Mark will always be my boy.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, again, congratulations on the release of the single and the album coming up, and it's going to be a fun ride for you.
Absolutely, my friend, and I appreciate you having me on, and I'm looking forward to hanging out and at the Reckless Shepherd.
Definitely,
it's going to be a good time. Really, it's a really nice venue, great beers and good food, and just they got it going on. So I'm glad that he's doing it there again this year. It's going to be a good time.
Awesome. Well, I'll see you there.
Absolutely, Joe. We appreciate you so much, man. Thanks for having me on.